Mm-hmm. And I think that like one of those things that we were talking about, this like constant conflation of what liberals say with what socialists say, is really important, because I think one of the things that reveals when you start thinking about it is that oftentimes Beck's writers, like don't really have a lot they could say about the things that socialists actually advocate. So just a couple quick examples. Socialists advocate universal, non-means tested social programs, but when Beck is making his case against the welfare state, and he literally says, by the way, in this book, this sounds like a straw man, but he says it, that organizations like the Lions Club and the PTA could make
Jerry
up.
Lewis telethons.
Jerry Lewis telethons. That was one of his examples
for the welfare state
of private organizations that could fill the role of the welfare state. But when he's arguing against an expansive welfare state, he talks about things like benefits cliffs. In other words, cases where their programs are means tested. So, for example, if you're going to lose your Medicaid qualification, if you get a little somewhat better job or more hours, then you have an incentive, you have a perverse incentive to keep the worst job or the fewer hours, because you'd be worse off overall with a little bit more money but no health insurance. And of course, that's true.
Yes.
But what any socialist would immediately point out is that's why we're against means tested. That's why we want universal sweeping social programs. Or one other example of this, I think the part of the review where we pointed this out was written by you. He gives the example of minimum wage laws, and it's superficially, it looks good. He cites some very reputable sounding sources to say that a $15 minimum wage would mean that fewer people were employed. Now, he cherry picks the sources, of course, and he cherry picks what they're saying, right? I think you pointed out that the Congressional Budget Office in particular said that some people would lose their jobs, but also—
And that other people would, and millions of people would be lifted out of poverty, and he conveniently left out the part where millions of people are lifted out of poverty.
Yeah, exactly. So it sounds good. It sounds authoritative, but then you're just skipping the other half of the cost-benefit analysis. You're also skipping the studies that say that that's not even true about jobs. But even if it is true about jobs, as you point out, like a $15 minimum wage is, even in terms of short-term reforms within the existing system, not the only thing that socialists want to have happen.
Right. And I think one point that needs to be made here is that notice that the things you've just said do not mean that there are factually false claims in the book. And this is what's, I think, really important, why I like your emphasis on argument so much, because it is, in fact, the case that the study that he cites says what he says it says. Right? It is, in fact, the case that there are perverse incentives with means testing, so that if your income goes up, you lose your benefits, so you might not want more income, so you might work less hard, whatever. Those things are not so. Oftentimes, conservatives who emphasize, quote, facts, they say, but look, all of this is facts. Disprove a single thing that I've said. Dinesh D'Souza often does this. He says, you can't disprove a single, I dare you to find a single false statement in the book. You say conservatives lie all the time. I haven't said a single thing that's false. And I think one crucial thing, and the reason that arguments are so important, is because what people don't recognize is you can lie with facts. You can lie with facts, and it seems paradoxical to lie with facts. A fact is a thing that is true. A lie is a thing that is false. How can you lie with facts? And the reason is you can lie with facts because of the arguments that you use them in the service of. And, you know, as you say, you leave the inconvenient fact out. You select, cherry picking is not, when you cherry pick, you haven't said anything that is actually untrue. I'm doing a climate change denial book right now, and it's interesting because it's the same thing, where they don't say things that are false. They point to like a Pacific island that has gained landmass rather than lost landmass, and they go, some Pacific islands are actually gaining landmass. Or they say like a glacier. This glacier has actually grown. Not glaciers overall, but they pick a glacier. And it's true. So you can go through and you might say like everything in this book is true, right? Could be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why, right. So just to kind of spell out the thought there, it's important because if all you're saying is they're cherry picking, which is true, then you haven't quite gotten where you want to go in terms of showing what's wrong with it. Because of course there are always, for all practical purposes, infinitely more facts you could talk about than you actually will talk about when presenting a case, right? So you need to show that the facts being left out are relevant somehow. And to show why they're relevant, you need to be able to show that if what they're saying, even if what they're saying is true, what they're getting out of it doesn't follow, right? Like in other words, that, it could be true that some of the islands are gaining landmass, but here's how that could be true without it being true that global climate change isn't a serious problem, even because of the landmass issue. It could be true that some people would lose their jobs with a higher minimum wage, but it wouldn't be true that that would be a net loss for the working poor, or even necessarily that would be a net increase in unemployment, because we also want federal jobs programs.
Well, yes. Oh, a really important point on the minimum wage that I always cite is that, we're socialists, right? And the argument that raising the minimum wage causes job loss is premised on the maintenance of capitalism, right? Why does raising the minimum wage threaten to shed jobs? The argument that conservatives make is they always say, if you raise the minimum wage, I, the business owner who wants to preserve my profits, will make my employees work twice as much and I will fire a bunch of people. And you say, and therefore raising the minimum wage will increase unemployment. And that might be factually true. But the important thing is it's premised on the maintenance of that relationship between capitalist and laborer, where we have a system where the wealth is in the hands of the people who are their only interest. They operate on a sociopathic profit maximizing logic, and so they are willing to destroy people's livelihoods rather than eat into their own profits. That's the underlying premise of the argument that factually a minimum wage raise would raise unemployment. And socialists would respond by saying, well, this is one reason why reforms that take place under capitalism are actually very limited in what you can get out of them. Just by raising the minimum wage and maintaining that division of who has power and control is ultimately limited for precisely the reason you've just pointed out.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we can, I think this is true for a lot of the things that we point out about capitalism, that the incentives that conservatives love to point out, that, if you impose this or that reform, capitalists, in order to preserve their profit margins, have an incentive to compensate for that by screwing people over somewhere else to make up for having to screw them over less over here. And of course, that is a great reason in itself to have a problem with capitalism. And we don't have to go to utopian here. We can look at real world examples like the Mondragon Corporation in Spain, which is a massive worker-owned company, where, of course, it exists within a market. They experience market shocks and market pressures like any other company, but the decision making by the company about what to do with the resulting pay that needs to be distributed is just going to be very different. It has verifiably been very different, because rather than an external owner who has different interests for the workers themselves are at least electing the people who are making these decisions, which shockingly matters quite a bit. Before I let you go, I do want to highlight one other thing that we talked about in the review, which people can read in the new print issue of Current Affairs, which I think is just being sent to people now. And and I guess they could read online in a few weeks maybe. But there's a point in there where he talks about the relationship between capitalism and socialism and individual potential in a way that kind of relates to what I'm about to talk about with Yara Brooke, and kind of the broader theme I've been trying to hit in the show. And so this is what he says. This is, Beck's writers from his book. Socialists believe that we can make the world a better place by taking property and wealth away from people who have it and centralizing economic, political, and social power. But I believe America is best when individuals are empowered with the freedom to pursue their own hopes and dreams. Maybe you're an auto mechanic who hopes to one day open your own shop. Or maybe you're a nurse who spends your free time studying to become a doctor. Whatever it is that drives you, that makes you feel excited about life, that's your American dream. And I believe that when we're free to pursue our own unique passions and goals in life, we're all better off. Nathan, why do we hate dreams and want to crush them?
Well, but don't you see, I mean, again, I think people need to see that actually, if you don't know much, if you haven't thought much about it, it sounds very compelling, doesn't it? I mean, it is this stirring language about, I just want you to be free to pursue your dreams. And, we have to then spend a lot of time like deconstructing every phrase in there and going, okay, but what do we mean by a dream? Who has, like, how do you start your own business? Well, you need capital. Who has the capital? Let's talk about inherited wealth. Let's talk about how privilege is passed on from generation to generation, right? The world is very complicated, but there are these beautiful, simple packaged messages about freedom and about not being interfered with by the state, and how the private sector are the creators of all wealth and the state are just parasites. And it takes time. Our essay is like 8,000 words. We're only just beginning, right? To go through every argument in this book would take so long, which is why I think it's so important that we as socialists, right? I can't even begin to go through and get all the stuff that is wrong, except to say that socialists are the core socialist argument has always been that capitalist freedom sounds great, but in practice is an illusion, and we need to think about what really creates freedom in people's lives and how to give that to them, because the freedom to work or starve is not real freedom, right? But we as socialists need to think about not only how to debunk the arguments, but how to present them in really compelling ways, because the thing that I got out of this book was being really scared at how persuasive it could be to someone who does not have a very strong economic background, has not really thought about the claims of socialists, and doesn't know what the real socialist would actually say in response.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess also, like, really quickly, a point that we make in the review is, that nurse who wants to become a doctor, hey, do you think she's going to have a better chance of becoming a doctor if higher education is tuition free, or if she has to go into debt to get it? That seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And the auto mechanic would start up his own place. I think that there could be there in that example some conflict between different conceptions of freedom, but I guess the real question is the point, right? Like, how is this shop going to be organized, right? Because if it's going to be organized as a cooperative, we love that, right?
Yeah. But if your dream is like the mechanic who dreams of one day exploiting other people, like, one day I'll be the person.
Yeah, I want to be the boss who can just tell everybody else what to do and pressure them to come in on their days off and all that stuff. Then, maybe that dream we wouldn't sign off on, because if your dream is to be Stalin and to like oppress other people, that's not necessarily a great dream that is valuable to us. But if what we're talking about is having as many people as possible get to live up to their full potential, that we're all about.
Yes. Well, agreed. What a beautiful note to end on. Right. Good luck with the Yaron Brooke. I'm excited to watch that.
All right.
Don't let him get away with anything.
Okay, I'll do my best. Thank you so much for coming on, Nathan.
All right, so nice to talk to you, Ben. Always great. I hope everyone reads this review. We had fun writing it.
Thank you.